We're joined this morning by Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill of the 28th Senatorial District. Good morning, Senator Phillips-Hill. I always say Kristin, so I have to say Kristin. Good morning, Kristin. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm well, and it's great to be on with you this morning.
Always a pleasure. We had 3 vetoed bills yesterday. One of the vetoed bills would have granted waivers to all manufacturers, garden centers, automobile dealerships, barbershops, salons, animal grooming, and messenger and agent services. Another, and that was HB 2388. HB 2412 would grant waivers to real estate and legal services. And the third vetoed bill, which was SB 327 coming out of your particular house, would have allowed individual counties to work closely with their health care providers and local businesses to develop emergency plans responsive to the situation in their counties. Those plans would have been required to be compliant with CISA and CDC health and safety regulations. So it wasn't like they were, ignoring everything. And they were all vetoed by the governor yesterday. What did you make of the vetoes? What's your take on that from the standpoint of being a senator there in the State House?
Gary, I thought it was the epitome of arrogance and hypocrisy. I will tell you that the governor had the Secretary of Health send a letter to the General Assembly saying, if we do this, people will die. And not even 4 hours after the governor vetoed the legislation that we had passed to reopen real estate and the legal services that it needs.
Right.
Remember, there are 3 essentials in life, right? Food, clothing, and shelter. Mm-hmm. We were the only state out of 50 states where you could not purchase a home. We had long debate on the floor. I gave the example of a local realtor had shared with me of a couple moving from Delaware, both members of the National Guard, one coming to work here at York Hospital, providing health care in this community, and a senator from Philadelphia used that example and said those people will bring coronavirus to York County and people will die.
Wow.
In our debate, right? So not even 4 hours later, the governor says, okay, we're going to reopen real estate.
Yeah.
And, it leaves you saying, well, is it harmful or is it not? Is this...
Yeah, 4 hours ago, people were going to die, but 4 hours later, they're not going to die, right? Is that what? I mean, that's the I deconstruct arguments from backward to forward, and as I listen to that, I think, okay, so all of a sudden, forget what I said 4 hours earlier. Now it's okay because I'm saying it. Is that what it is? Or because we're saying it? We've learned that much in the last 4 hours that we now can go back and say, well, now we can open real estate. I mean, if anyone stopped to think about the silliness and ridiculousness of this, if it weren't in such serious times, they'd be laughing, right?
Absolutely. Look, the governor is not a king, and this is what he's acting like. We have 3 co-equal branches of government, and, to me, again, an incredible act of arrogance and hypocrisy.
I was reading...
And I think...
I was reading a piece by Gordon Denlinger, and he is the National Federation of Independent Business. He's the head of that, and he's a state director here in Pennsylvania. He said something yesterday that and I just wanted you to react to this. He said, this is not, and this goes hand in hand with what you just said, this is not a one-man show, and many duly elected lawmakers should have a say in the handling of this lockdown of the people and small businesses they represent. Many small business owners are beyond frustration with our governor and his inability to intelligently balance the health crisis while also addressing the economic crisis in our state. There can be lives and livelihoods saved. We have heard daily from numbers of small business owners who are not going to make it if there isn't more flexibility granted soon, and other logical, safe, and reasonable plans have been proposed to keep the vulnerable safe while still offering relief to shuttered, dying businesses or highly limited operations, quote unquote. I can't think of a more reasonable statement that I've heard than that, Senator.
I would just give that a great big amen.
Yeah.
Gordon is spot on. And look, Pennsylvania's corona crisis is in long-term care, right?
Yes.
Long-term care has 3 state agencies and 2 sets of expansive regulations in place to oversee that. And, and I said this the last time I was on, I was a swimmer. I learned to stay in my lane. There are 6 key areas on the Department of Health's website of their primary missions. One of those 6 things are nursing homes, right?
Yes.
And when you look at what's going on in this Commonwealth, right, 70% of our coronavirus deaths are in long-term care facilities.
Correct.
We had them before us. They testified. We feel ignored. We don't have the resources. Last week, we just passed $507 million to go to provide them with the resources that they need. Right? Now, the governor continuously talks about data-driven decision-making.
Yes.
Right? Well, when the data clearly shows that your corona crisis is in long-term care and you don't act and move swiftly to provide the resources and target that impact there, then you have not done your job. And so, and here's what's really, really frustrating. You don't read about all this in the local news.
Right.
People want to know why we're not hearing about that. I don't know.
I think what's happened. I think what's happened to a lot of news companies, and both nationally and maybe even locally, is they have become mouthpieces for the administration. They have become mouthpieces to anybody other than the governor. They're foolish or they're silly. I saw the other day an article by Scott Fisher I have a lot of respect for, but he wrote an article based on a video that he saw from Mike Jones' meeting last 2 Saturdays ago, and as I watched in there, he put in there about some words that were adverbs that would have described Scott's feeling about that, and I thought it was a poorly written article, and I thought to myself, okay, where he stands, and listen, do I want to support the governor? I do. I really do, and I've supported the governor in the beginning on some of the decisions he made. There comes a point in time, though, where I think as we evolve further and further and further into this, that we all need to be able to show the ability to widen our scope. And I don't think that he has generally done that very well. And the silliness yesterday of opening up real estate 4 hours after he said, you get a letter saying if you do this, people will die. I mean, we have to start to question a little bit about these so-called quote-unquote experts, don't we?
Look, I think that you can't play politics with this.
Agreed.
And that's the point that it has come to. People's livelihoods are on the line. And I've said this many times. Every business is essential because every business in some way puts food on your table, a roof on your head, and clothing on your back, right?
Yes.
And we are now at this point where I am still being inundated with calls from people who have not heard from the unemployment compensation system.
Right.
We're now going on 10 weeks. How are people paying their bills? And so, I think we put forward responsible, thoughtful, data-driven legislation to open up the economy in a way that was responsible, intelligent, and safe. And, I pull the data. I had my morning conversation with Representative Seth Grove.
Mm-hmm.
We do our data comparisons. Boy, and if I don't send it to him immediately, my staff's going to get a phone call saying, "Where's the data from today?" Right?
Is he a little OCD about the data there, is what you're saying?
Seth Grove is on top of that data.
Okay.
So, when we look at the statistics, it really shows that York County has led during this pandemic. And what happens here in York County is very different than what happens in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia,
Correct.
Right? So allowing counties to make data-driven decisions about what works in their county, what their county's needs are, I think makes all the sense in the world.
We're with Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill of the 28th Senatorial District. And Senator Hill, you were making a point before, Senator Phillips-Hill, you were making a point before we went to the break, and I wanted to get back to that.
Well, we were talking about data and making data-driven decisions. And right now, we're moving into yellow. But your countyans, they want to be green. And no county has moved into the green phase, and there's no metrics. And I think it's paramount that the administration provide transparency and guidance, again, because our lives and our livelihoods in York County and all across the Commonwealth, they are on that line, right? And when I'm looking at the data, York County is the only county in the Commonwealth that's tested over 8,000 individuals and has a case count lower than 1,000.
Wow.
The only county in the Commonwealth, right? We've had over 10,500 negative tests. The county average for negative tests is 4,269. We've only had 15 nursing home cases. The county average across the state is 302.
Wow.
And as of Monday, we had 4 deaths in our nursing homes, long-term care facilities.
So we've done a pretty good job. I mean, four deaths is terrible, but we've had anytime you have a death, but we've done a good job comparatively to the other 66 counties here in the state, right?
Correct. And we have protected our public health. We have limited exposure in our nursing homes. We flattened the curve. We slowed the spread of the virus. And right now, I think that the governor's administration's lack of guidance as to what we need to do going forward is really going to only lead to more individuals challenging his authority and questioning his ability to lead. You can't just say, you'll move to green. Well, how would we do that? We don't know yet. And
they don't have criteria yet that tells us how we're going to do that. I was looking at the Keystone Report this morning, and they had a couple of headlines up there. Representative Perry is saying to federal investigators to investigate Governor Wolf's handling of nursing homes. That has come under fire. Pennsylvania also sold nursing home testing plan as universal and radical, advocates optional and insufficient. There's a full list out now. Pennsylvania is releasing the names of nursing homes with coronavirus cases and deaths. But one of the things that we have seen in the last couple of weeks that have reached national headlines has been the handling of our nursing homes in the beginning, where we had quick response programs in place to do, and yet for some reason we did not do those. And we also had stories about Secretary of Health Levine, who had people who came out of hospitals sent back into nursing homes. And then, of course, later on, in what did not become a very good optic, her mother asked to be removed from nursing homes to somewhere else, and she did that and said, well, I'm looking out for everyone's health. So we have all this stuff right now in nursing homes starting to be a big story here in Pennsylvania. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think, again, it's, is it science or is it politics? And the optics are beyond horrible. It's hypocritical and it's arrogant. If that care facility isn't good enough for her mother, it's not good enough for anyone's mother.
Yeah.
Gary, I came onto the school board. I had a problem with a teacher, one of my kids in high school. I went to the superintendent. I'm a newly elected school board member, and I said, how am I supposed to handle this? I don't want any issues. And the superintendent said to me, your child has that teacher? Calls in the high school principal and says, a school board director's kid never belongs in that teacher's class. And I turned to the superintendent and I said, you know what? If that teacher's not good enough for a school board director's kid, that teacher's not good enough for anybody's kid.
Well, that's a great point. Let me come back. I've got 2 callers for you here very quickly. Howard in New Park's got a question for you. Good morning, Howard. You have a question for Senator Phillips-Hill.
Yeah, good morning. I have read weeks ago that Nancy Pelosi told the blue state governors, keep the lockdown on as long as possible. And she told them, too, that if you suffer political defeat, when we take back the presidency, the House, and the Senate, you will be rewarded. And I think that's exactly, Wolf is nothing more than a Nazi clicking his heels together.
Well, I don't want to use that, Howard, but let me get a reaction here to see if Senator Phillips-Hill thinks that. Do you think that anywhere in any of this, I mean, that's really a horrible thought, that someone would trash the economy to hurt President Trump?
That's an absolutely repugnant thought.
It is.
That anyone would do that.
I agree.
and again, you can't play politics with people's lives.
No.
And if that, in fact, is true, it is beyond reprehensible.
Let's get John in Redline very quickly, who is on here with Senator Phillips-Hill. Good morning, John. Very quickly, your question.
My question is, why on your mail-in ballots do you fill in your party affiliation on the outer envelope? That cannot be happening.
I didn't know that was the case. Let me get.
I will tell you.
Thanks, John.
I saw a mail-in ballot. My sons are home. They go to school in Philadelphia, so they're home with us. They just filled out their mail-in ballots last night, and there was no place on the outside to indicate your party affiliation.
Okay.
Now, they are Republicans, and, the ballot inside, started with President of the United States and then went all the way down through the state row offices.
Gary Sutton with Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill, who has spent the half hour with us. Howard asked a question earlier about, governors of blue states keep this closed down because it'll help them to reelect get another president in there. And, you can't help but have people in these politically charged times who sit back and say, well, why would you be so vociferous about not wanting to have the legislature involved, who happens in this case to be a Republican legislature in the state? Why wouldn't you want them involved? So there is the appearance. And again, we hate to think that anybody would even think like that, and I still would think our governor would not. But you'd hate to think of the appearance of that even happening in any way, shape, or form. And if it turns out anywhere that Nancy Pelosi said that or anybody said that, I can't think of a more despicable, heinous thought in playing with people's lives in order to get someone else elected. I hope that would never, ever be the case. And yet perception sometimes in lieu of the truth becomes the truth, right?
Well, yes, it does. And again, I am with you. It is absolutely reprehensible to think that the governor would play politics with people's lives. And I will say this, as things continue to progress, and we see that if that becomes the reality, then the legislature is going to have to put an end to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we go from there. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. I know it's been a long time. Final thoughts for people. We have a minute to go here. Final thoughts for citizens out there who are really kind of looking at this whole time right now with lots of questions.
Well, and I always say, please reach out. And I will tell you, we've been averaging about 500 contacts through emails and faxes and phone calls. Reach out, and we're happy to track down that answer for you and try to assist you in these very challenging times.
Senator Phillips-Hill, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you very, very much.